Now, in a bold and controversial move that has sent shock waves across West Africa, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the young and charismatic leader of Burkina Faso, has officially, when I say official, I mean officially, dissolved the country's Independent Electoral Commission. Now, this decision, announced just days ago, may have altered the course of democracy in Burkina Faso forever. But we're going to be asking today, is this the end of electoral integrity in the Sahel, or the beginning of a new African political order rooted in sovereignty and security? Today, I'm going to be taking a deep dive into the motives, implications, and also consequences of this sweeping reform, without focusing too much on who Traoré is, but rather what he is doing to the political institutions of this country, and also the possibly the continent of Africa as well. I want you to stick around, watch this video till the end. My name is Dedan from Uganda, and this is my YouTube channel, Dedan Vlogs. In case you're a returning subscriber, if you watch my videos and then you come back again to watch my other videos, I really cannot take it for granted. I really appreciate. And in case you are a new subscriber, I want you to kindly, watch my other older videos and kindly subscribe in case you've not subscribed. Like the video, share the video, and let's start today's video. Now, in a press statement delivered on July 17th, 2025, the Minister of Territorial Administration, his name is Emile Zabo, he announced the government's decision to dissolve Burkina Faso's Independent Electoral Commission, known as CENI, okay? And this institution, long regarded as a cornerstone of the electoral credibility, was accused of being, one, costly, two, it was accused of being foreign influenced and also out of step with the country's current election. So according to Zabo, the electoral body, it cost nearly $870,000 a year to maintain. That's a significant figure, for a nation grappling with both economic and also security crises. And more importantly, the junta, claimed that CENI, or the Independent Electoral Commission, no longer reflected the sovereign will of the Burkinabe people, or the people of Burkina Faso. So, effective immediately, all responsibilities related to organizing elections will now fall under the Ministry of Interior, or the Ministry of Internal Affairs. That's a direct arm of the military-led government. This is not just an administrative shift, it is a political earthquake in Burkina Faso. Now, let me tell you something. For decades, the Independent Electoral Commission in Burkina Faso served as what we can call as a buffer between political actors, and the ballot box. CENI was charged with organizing, overseeing, and also validating electoral processes from voter registration up to the final results. While its independence was often questioned, it provided at least a perception of neutrality and also fairness, especially during the transition periods after previous coups and also uprisings. So removing this electoral commission, it removes more than a bureaucratic organ, it eliminates one of the last independent checks on Traoré's military government. And the question that lingers in the ears of the people, for example, Burkina Faso, is who will ensure free and fair elections now? Let me tell you something. Traoré's government argues that the move is justified. They claim that Burkina Faso is in a state of war against terrorism, and the country cannot afford expensive bureaucracies that don't contribute to national security. The junta also claims that CENI, which is the electoral commission I'm talking about, had become too exposed to foreign influence. In fact, this may be the most telling clue. Traoré's government has been leaning away from France and also other Western, partners, accusing them of meddling in internal affairs under the banner of democracy and also human rights. Now, this dissolution, in their eyes, is a reclamation of national sovereignty. But critics argue that it is a step towards what you can call authoritarianism camouflaged in the rhetoric of patriotism. So what is happening in Burkina Faso is not unique, okay? Just look at Mali and Niger. two neighboring Sahelian nations that have also seen recent coups and also military takeovers. In Mali, for example, the transitional government postponed elections multiple times, citing insecurity. In Niger, or what people call Niger, after the 2023 coup, the junta similarly also dismantled democratic institutions and is yet to commit to any clear political path. So all these countries now from they form what we call the Alliance of Sahel States, the AES, a regional bloc that has not only withdrawn from ECOWAS, but also increasingly views Western democracy as a foreign agenda. Okay, so the pattern is clear. Security first, elections later, or perhaps not at all. But can a nation truly defeat terrorism and rebuild itself without the legitimacy of the people's voice? That is the question echoing across the continent. Inside Burkina Faso, reactions have been mixed, Some view Traore as a hero, a soldier who stood up in the West and reclaimed African dignity. And for these citizens, elections can wait, The real fight is against the jihadists who have terrorized communities and also destabilized the north. But others, for example, particularly urban civil society groups, students and also journalists and political parties, they see this as a dangerous consolidation of power, Many fear that with no independent electoral body and no clear timeline for elections, Ibrahim Traoré may stay in power for beyond the intended 2029 deadline, And there have already been, hushed conversations, quiet protests and online debates asking who will watch the watchers. And with media censorship tightening, how long before these voices are silenced completely? Now, the dissolution of Burkina Faso's Electoral Commission has drawn sharp criticism from international observers and also regional organizations. The Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, already at odds with Traore's regime after the country withdrew from its membership, labeled the move deeply concerning and a significant regulation for democratic governance in West Africa. While ECOWAS has limited influence now that Burkina Faso is no longer under its legal framework, it still remains a loud voice calling for the return of constitutional order. Western powers, particularly the United States, France, and also the European Union, they have issued formal statements urging the junta to reconsider the decision. Many fear these signals as a complete abandonment of democratic transition. The European Commission said it was alarmed by the shift in electoral oversight to a military-led institution, warning that such centralization could compromise future elections and also speak unrest. France itself, which has a historically complex relationship with Burkina Faso, chose a more muted approach, aware that further criticism may be used by Traore's government to stoke and French sentiment. And on the other hand, there are countries and blocs, for example, that have remained silent, or even, cautiously supportive. For example, like Russia, China, and also Turkey, they have not condemned the decision. With some state-run media outlets even praising Traore's, sovereign decision-making and his resistance to foreign control. So this reflects the new geopolitical chessboard in Africa, where Western democracies are being challenged by non-Western powers who prioritize stability and also strategic influence over democratic ideals. So the UN, for example, through the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, expressed worry about the erosion of independent institutions. While they acknowledged Burkina Faso's serious security challenges, yes, but they also emphasized that such crises must not be used to justify permanent authoritarian rule. They also stressed that elections are very essential to long-term peace building, a point Traore's government seems unwilling to accept. Still, maybe the most powerful reaction has come not from international organizations, but from the African intelligentsia academics and also journalists. What these people are doing, for example, the political analysts across the continent, they have expressed concern that a dangerous precedent is being set where military governments justify the dismantling of democratic institutions under the guise of sovereignty and also anti-imperialism. And for them, this is less about Burkina Faso, okay, and more about what it signals for the future of governance in Africa. So, Ibrahim Traoré's decision has stirred deeper fears about the fragility of democratic institutions across Africa. In many countries, electoral commissions are among the last lines of defense against absolute rule. And when such bodies are dismantled and eliminated or maybe compromised, it opens the door for governments, especially unelected ones, to consolidate power indefinitely. So Burkina Faso's case shows just how easy it is for democratic structures to vanish under the weight of emergency powers. What we are witnessing now in Burkina Faso is not an isolated act, but a regional trend. In the past 5 years, for example, Africa has experienced more coups than any other region in the world. Mali, Guinea, Niger, Chad, Sudan, and now in Burkina Faso. And in nearly all these cases, democratic processes have been either suspended or manipulated, with every additional junta that survives and also thrives. The argument for elections weakens. Military leaders across the continent are beginning to frame democracy as Western export, not a local aspiration. And this shift is being amplified by a new generation of African youth who, disillusioned by decades of corruption and also failed leadership, are beginning to see strong, centralized leadership as a viable alternative. They point to the failures of elected governments that delivered neither security nor prosperity. And for these young people, order trumps processes, and Traore, with his guns and gloves, represents decisive action in contrast to the long-winded debates of parliaments and also parties. So, however, the long-term danger is that democratic backsliding becomes normalized. Once electoral commissions are dissolved, once constitutions are amended, and once terms are extended, it becomes increasingly difficult to reverse course. What begins as temporary military transition often evolves into a permanent regime. And without mechanisms for peaceful political change, the likelihood of violent uprisings only grows. So the challenge for Africa now is how to defend democratic values in a way that resonates with local realities. People need security, people need dignity, and also development, but not at the expense of their voice, right? The question is no longer whether democracy is the right system, but how it can be made to work for African, or maybe what you can call the Africans by Africans, without becoming a puppet of global superpowers or a victim of its own inefficiency. So, with the Electoral Commission gone, all eyes now turn toward Traoré's plan for 2029, the year previously announced as the end of the transition. Will there be elections at all? And if so, who will organize them? Because if the Interior Ministry remains in charge, how can one expect transparency when the body reporting the results answers directly to the junta? Many analysts, they believe that the dissolution of the Electoral Commission is part of Traoré's long-term strategy to remain in power indefinitely. While he has publicly claimed, that no interest in clinging to power, his actions suggest otherwise. He has written the transitional charter, extended timelines, and now eliminated one of the institutions that could have, held him accountable at the ballot box. The writing on the wall is increasingly difficult to ignore. So, in that context, 2029 may become just another deadline pushed further down the road. With continued insecurity in the north, the government can easily justify further delays, and with no independent electoral body, Ibrahim Traoré holds all the cards. He can create the conditions, select the candidates, and also even determine the outcome, all under the banner of national security. So this strategy, it mirrors the political tactics of other African strongmen who rose through military ranks and also stayed through a constitutional manipulation. From Uganda's Yoweri Museveni, my president, I'm not afraid to say that, to Cameroon's Paul Biya, Africa has, seen leaders rebrand themselves from liberators to presidents for life. If Ibrahim Traoré is not careful, he may fall into the very trap he claims to be breaking. But maybe he sees something different. Maybe in his mind, Burkina Faso is building a new mode of governance. one in which the military acts as a guardian of national sovereignty until the nation is ready for democracy. The problem is who decides when the country is ready. Ibrahim Traoré supporters, they urge that he is not dismantling democracy, right? But reimagining it. And they also speak of sovereign democracy, a model where decisions are made for the people, not necessarily by the people. Now, in this view, elections are just one tool among many, not the ultimate test of legitimacy. Leadership, they urge, should be, measured by performance, not processes. Now, this argument is now is not new. I want you to know this, because similar claims were made by leaders like Rwanda's Paulo Kagame and Ethiopia's Meles Zenawi, who emphasized results over rituals. So the idea is that development must proceed democracy, not follow it. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. And and for example, in regions plagued by conflict, poverty, and also external interference, elections, can sometimes do more harm than good, especially when they are marred by fraud or violence. But critics see this as a slippery slope to dictatorship. Once a leader begins to erode institutions in the name of sovereignty, there is rarely a return of pluralism. The absence of accountability leads to corruption, repression, and also stagnation. And even if the leader begins with good intentions, the system eventually becomes more about preserving power than delivering change. So the real tragedy is that Burkina Faso was once a promising path, After the fall of Blaise Compaoré in 2014, the country had begun to rebuild its democratic institutions. Citizens participated in elections, civil society organizations were vibrant, and the media was relatively free. That hope has now been, dimmed by military boots and also martial slogans, Still, the final verdict on Traoré's model is not yet written. It depends on what comes next, how he handles dissent, how he manages power, and whether he never, or maybe he ever truly gives it up. For now, the world watches and waits. Burkina Faso today stands at a crossroads, and so does Africa. The question is no longer just about the one country or one leader, but about the election of an entire continent. And will African nations continue the difficult path towards accountable governance, or will they drift back into cycles of military rule and also strongman politics? Traoré represents both a symptom and a symbol. A symptom of a broken system where democracy failed to deliver real change, but also a symbol of a new generation of African leadership, bold and apologetic and also determined to shake off colonial structures. The danger is that in doing so, they may also discard the few gains made in democratic governance. Is it easy to dismiss elections as fraud? But without them, people are left with no peaceful way to express their will. Without electoral commissions, there is no neutral ground where legitimacy can be debated and also decided. And without democratic institutions, there is no safeguard against tyranny, The dream of all African Renaissance must include not just economic growth and also cultural pride, but also freedom, participation, and justice. These values cannot be imported, but they must also not be ignored. They must be cultivated from within, rooted in African soil, and also adapted to African realities. As the dust settles over the decision to dissolve, CENI, the Electoral Commission, one truth remains: the future of Burkina Faso, and maybe of Africa, will depend not on who holds power, but on how they choose to use the power, right? So guys, that's all I had for you today. I hope you enjoyed the video. I don't know if you enjoyed the video. If you come from Burkina Faso, please let me see your hand, And as we end this deep dive into Burkina Faso's dramatic political shift, we are left with more questions than answers. That's fact. Is Captain Traoré ushering in a new era of sovereign leadership? Or is this the beginning of a longer journey into military dominance? Only time will tell. But one thing is very certain: the dissolution of the Electoral Commission is not just a national event. It is a signal to the rest of Africa, a signal that rules of democracy are being rewritten, reinterpreted, and also in some places completely erased. If you found this video insightful, please consider subscribing to the channel. tap the like button, leave a comment with your thoughts, and also share this video to help more people understand the shifting tides in African politics. This is not just about Burkina Faso. This is about the future of Africa. And you watching me, you're part of the future of Africa, and you're part of that conversation. Until next time, stay informed, stay curious, and above all, I want you to stay awake as you watch more of my YouTube videos. My name is Dedan. I come from Uganda. Not Burkina Faso, actually. I come from Uganda. But in case you come from Burkina Faso or any other part of the country, any other part of Africa, go to the comment section. Tell me which country are you watching this video from. See you on the next one.